Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from Newslaundry.
This is a Newslaundry podcast and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज़ लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of Hafta, and we're actually in our 291st episode. So we are 9 short of our 300 episodes. Fantastic. We'll do something special then.
Are all of us going on leave like Manisha wants to?
No one is going on leave.
Well, no one, I didn't get it, so you have your answer.
So you have your answer. Exactly. See, समझदार के लिए इशारा ही काफी है. So before I introduce my guests on the panel today, just a couple of announcements. We have the Hafta is free. It's not behind the paywall for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So do share it with others who you think would be interested in subscribing to Newslaundry. We have a full team behind our podcast. There's Snigdha, Aditya, Lipi, Harshula, Anil, the panelists. So a lot of pre-production and production goes into it. So to support that, do pay to keep news free and subscribe to Newslaundry. And we have a new NL Sena project up, which I shall tell you about further into the Hafta. And our Independence Month offer of subscribers getting the Tiranga soap set, Sabki Dhulai, because that is our motto, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai, Sabki Dhulai, Sabki Dhulai. That offer is on till the end of this month. However, if you're already a subscriber, this offer is open to you at any time. If you want that fantastic herbal soap set, you can just mail us and we'll give it to you with an extension of your subscription. So subscribers can get that anytime. On the panel today, we have in office Raman Kirpal. Hi, sir.
Hi.
Mehraj D Lone.
Hello.
Manisha Pande.
Hi.
Joining me on the phone line from Patna is Anand Vardhan, who's been on the move for past few weeks. Hopefully, he'll be able to give us some update on the Bihar flood situation, on which we are very low on information. So, welcome, Anand.
Hello.
And we have Banjot Kaur, who's joining us. Banjot is based out of Delhi. She has been a journalist for a little over 10 years. She's been reporting on health for the last 8 years, and before joining Down to Earth magazine, she has worked at the Times of India in Patna for more than 5 years. She started her career in 2012 with ANI, and she's an IMC grad. Welcome, Banjot.
Hi everyone.
And you have pretty much, I'm seeing where all you've traveled to as part of your reporting. It's pretty much most of India. So before we get into, Banjot is going to tell us, we're going to talk about COVID because the last, 3 or 4 weeks, we've hardly discussed COVID, which is still a pandemic staring us in the face. But before we do that, Manisha, can we have the headlines of what all made the news this week?
Yes, a serological survey in Delhi showed that those between the ages of 5 and 17 were most exposed to the novel coronavirus, in Delhi at least. COVID-19 positivity rate is inching up again in Delhi. It stands at 7.4. And yesterday, I think India recorded 70,000 cases.
No, today.
Today, 74,000.
75,700 some cases. That's
Today.
about, yeah.
And that's in a day.
Yes, in a day.
And today
Wow.
is Thursday. It is 10:30 in the morning and it is the 27th of August while we
So
record
that's
this.
the
That
maximum.
number is from yesterday. I mean, it was updated today,
70,000
but
was
it's
from
from
yesterday.
yesterday.
In the morning, I mean, yes.
And they updated it today,
update.
yeah.
That's the highest we've recorded in a day, right?
Probably.
Oxford COVID-19 vaccine, the update on that is that Serum Institute has begun clinical trials in India. World's first confirmed coronavirus reinfection has also been reported in Hong Kong. NEET and JEE exams, meanwhile, in India are going to be held in September, as announced earlier. Students had protested. They wanted it postponed. That's not happening, it seems. Bihar flood situation remains grim. 8.3 million people have been affected. I've seen some reporting in BBC and Aaj Tak on this. Sonia Gandhi offered to resign as Congress interim president at a virtual CWC meeting. There was a lot of drama over the weekend over this. She offered to resign. Her resignation was obviously not accepted. And then the Congress said, "Ki theek hai, we will hold elections. Sonia ji must continue with her able leadership. We will have elections, but we want Rahul ji to please take over." So that was what happened. Prashant Bhushan, meanwhile, is firm on his apology. The SC has given him plenty of opportunities to apologize and say, why don't you do it? He's saying no, he doesn't want to do it. A black man was shot 7 times in the back by police in Wisconsin and he's now paralyzed. That's another crime that's made news.
And this has led to huge protests
Yeah.
in the US. And Bloomsbury pulled out their involvement with the Delhi riots book called
Yeah.
Delhi 2020, and we shall
And
discuss
now
that.
Garuda Prakashan has taken over the responsibility of
Yes.
making
For
it
making
seem-
such an important book.
Pakistan has listed Dawood Ibrahim's address in Karachi, imposed financial sanctions on the gangster.
And our news channels went to town as something new has happened. We'll explain further in the Hafta why this was, again, not news, but it became this huge hawa.
Karimoi has demanded Ayush Ministry to probe and take action into imposition of Hindi at a webinar. 11 dead and 3 people missing in a building collapse in Raigad. It's monsoon and you hear a lot about these building collapse. I think last year there was a very tragic one in Pune.
Yeah, and I
A
think
bunch
death
of people
toll
are
is
dead.
13
Yeah.
now.
Toll is 30.
Terrible news of layoffs continue. Accenture has laid off employees and 10,000 people are said to be affected in India. NIA has filed a charge sheet against Masood Azhar, 19 others in the 2019 Pulwama attack. Nadda asserts NDA unity, reiterates Nitish Kumar will lead Bihar campaign. Chirag Paswan makes some noises about
Yes.
CM candidates. So Bihar polls.
So maybe Anand will be able to
Heating
tell us
up.
a little more about this as well.
And the monsoon session of Parliament from September 14 to October 14 will begin. And there'll be
To
a
October 1.
to October 1. There'll be a 4-hour daily sitting and no off days.
And of course, the US elections are upon America. And there were some very entertaining speeches that if we have the time, we shall discuss a little bit. But first, let's start with the COVID news. So Banjot, you're reporting on health. Just tell us, it seems to have vanished from the headlines because there's, NEET, there is Riya Chakravarti for some reason. But where are we on the vaccine now? Apparently, this Oxford vaccine, which gets the most kind of, I guess, credible press. The trials have started here in India. What about Putin's vaccine? Do we know anything on that? And how good or bad is India?
So, to begin with vaccines, yes, the vaccines of Oxford University, the trials for them have begun in India also. But even if we get positive results out of phase 2 and phase 3 trials, which are happening in India, it's not that it's going to prove to be a silver bullet. There is a long chain. So once we have the trial results in, then we hear that the manufacturing has also begun. But even if we have vaccine in the market, there is a whole chain of storing them and then making them go down to the level of grassroots, and then we will have to train our healthcare workers to administer them. So it's a long shot that we are looking at. There is also a debate now that now we have so many, at least 31 vaccine candidates around the world, which are in second and third phase of, in various phases of human trials, and 7 vaccine candidates in second and third phase of human trials. But are our hopes misplaced with these vaccines? The short answer is possibly yes, because it's not going to be easy to give vaccine to each and every one. And we are dealing with a viral infection. So if I and you get it, but not the person living next to us, we are still very much prone to the infection. So we really should not have much hopes from the vaccines. We still will have to believe in social distancing, wearing masks, washing hands, etc.
So, but when you say that if you and I get it, but our neighbor doesn't have the vaccine, but you and I are safe, the neighbor isn't safe, isn't that right?
But the neighbor can still infect people around. And is vaccine going to give us 100% immunity and for lifelong? No.
Okay.
Is vaccine going to be 100% effective? No. So that small room of being infected will always be there.
Right.
So that is bit about vaccines. You asked about Russian vaccine. Well, that's very interesting, because if you heard the last WHO presser, which took place this week itself, Soumya Swaminathan, the chief scientist there, said that even they were not privy to the data of the trials, phase 1 and phase 2 trials of the Russian vaccine candidate. And
Right.
the third phase is even not started. So there is a lot of gray area in the Russian vaccine. In fact, that is not there even on the WHO list of candidates as of now as we speak. So we have to be very, very cautious about it.
Well, there is a lot of gray area in anything Russian, not just the vaccine, but Jyot, the Oxford vaccine. I know I had read in the papers maybe a month or more than a month ago that phase 2 and 3 had already started in the UK. So what you're saying is the phase 2 and 3 started there a month ago. In India, they've just started right now, like yesterday.
Yes.
So what are the
absolutely.
results of the phase 2 and 3 over there? Is it showing some promise? Is it showing positive results? So the data is not out yet.
The data is yet not out, but whatever, a bit of news you get to read, so far so good. But unless we have, really good data to read and understand, and, the experts and immunologists make sense for us, it's really difficult to say at this moment.
Now, last weekend I interviewed Barkha at Quorum because Haryana has allowed clubs and restaurants and all to open. And there was quite a decent turnout, and they've installed that UV thing in the air conditioning duct,
Mhm. Yeah.
which kills the virus. So there's several people I spoke with, including the management of that club. Barkha was saying, other people also saying that now that different states, different cities, it appears anything from 20 to 40% are already infected. We have reached herd immunity numbers. Now, I'm not a medical expert or a health reporter, but yet people wanted to get out and go about things as normal. And to be honest, from the first 2 weeks when I was a lot more careful, I would not have gone into an area where there were 40 people. Although it's a very large area, but still I probably wouldn't have gone. Now I go. I'm open to going and getting back to as close as normal.
And taking precautions.
With precautions, of course. So, I mean, where is the science on that? Because I see a lot of world leaders saying that as well in different parts of the world, and not just Trump, but I see some European leaders saying that, we can get back to normal. We have to have some attempts there. I saw interviews from Greece. I saw interviews from Spain. Where is the world on this? Where is the science on this, Banjot?
See, you used the term herd immunity. Now, that I believe is one of the most, most oft-used term these days. But at the same time, it's one term on which the understanding has not been very clear. There is a science part of on which the experts are still debating, but among the masses, it seems that we have settled with this debate, which shouldn't be the case. Now, you talked about 20 to 40%. I hope you were referring to seroprevalence, or what is also known as seropositivity. Right?
Correct.
Let me tell you in brief about this seroprevalence and seropositivity. They are one and the same. So when a sero survey takes place, what do they look for? They look for the antibodies which come, which develop in a person once he or she has been infected. Now, if 20 to 40% population has shown seroprevalence, does it mean that this much of population is totally safe? No, it does not mean so, in black and white. The reason I tell you, when these sero surveys look for antibodies, they just look for what is known as IgG antibodies. And out of these antibodies, there are something which are known as neutralizing antibodies. Now, to simplify this for you, neutralizing antibodies are the ones which actually fight off, against the virus. None of the sero surveys conducted in India so far has told us that in the sampled population, what was the proportion of neutralizing antibodies. We have absolutely no data on that at the moment. So no matter what percentage of sampled population is found to be showing seropositivity or seroprevalence, we really can't say that this proportion of the population is protected and it will not get infected once again. We really can't say that till we know what is the proportion of neutralizing antibodies. So that takes us to the debate of herd immunity. If we could have said that, look, this much of population has immunity and has antibodies, then we would have said that, yes, herd immunity is in and, we can move out without having much of the baggage on our, at the back of our minds. But we really do not know whether we have reached that stage or not, at least in India. Outside India too, as you spoke of, you spoke about a couple of nations, we really do not know whether, first of all, there's a debate, what is that proportion of seroprevalence which leads to herd immunity? So you have experts saying that a 20% or 30% seropositivity can bring in herd immunity. And then you have another section of experts saying 50 to 60%. So there is no standard definition on it. The common refrain is we are learning about this virus as the time goes by. We really do not have a final verdict on anything. So it's difficult to say it's a yes or no. We just have to find out the middle path. It's like, damn we do and damn we not.
Sure. Now I think today is the 21st day that India has consecutively recorded the most cases per day, daily cases. Yeah. Today is the 21st. So I just want to bring in Anand here. Anand, you remember, we had done on the Hafta when this had just started, and there was that fear that all these trains full of migrant labor going back to Bihar, and Bihar will be the next explosion. Has that happened? Was that an unfounded fear? Because I know they were testing people at the railway station and almost 20% positives were coming out. Has that led to any significant healthcare alarm in Bihar or not really? It's like as the rest of India.
No, with a sluggish start, later the infection, and there was a phase where infection grew very ominously. But with, I think, the latest figures suggest 82% recovery rate, which is more than 6% what is the national average. The mortality rate is less than 0%. Around 626 people have died of this disease. And even the positive infection rate is well below 3. So if we go by numbers, the situation is not that alarming. But I would say that there was a mid phase, say 3 or 4 weeks ago, where when the mood had certainly changed from that of a bit of indifference to a sort of alarm, but that has eased out in public psyche in last 2-3 weeks. Again, there is a sort of indifference to it. As far as migrant, the scare about migrant, earlier the figures were that, in fact, government data suggested that there was a point when the new positive cases had a very high number of people returning back home from different cities in India, and it was at one point as high as 74% of new positive cases were of migrants. Now, since that phase has ended, new data is not available that, at least I don't see it, that in the recent spike, say 2-3 weeks ago, what was the contribution of this section?
Right. And when it comes to the cases, the rate at which they're going up, I'll just give you right now the total number of the last numbers that we have COVID cases as per Wednesday, that is the end of yesterday. Total number of cases in India were 32,34,000, that's 3.2 million, and total deaths were 59,449. Now, at the rate that we are going, Banjot, is it possible that India will be number one in the amount of cases we have, or is America too way ahead to catch up on that?
See, America and India are, I mean, both are very unpredictable in terms of, the case load that we are seeing. So America has had a very long peak, I would say, in fact. So it's a bit difficult to say something like this, whether India would be having more caseload per day than America in coming weeks and days. But yes, as you said in the beginning of your program, India has been contributing to the highest number of new cases every day for quite some time now. So if that happens, what you asked me just now, I wouldn't be surprised. It depends on the time, on the length of the peak. If our peak is also as long as America's is, we may have numbers worse than America. So it's still a bit early to say. It depends on the peak that we have.
So there's been a lot of discussion about whether India is undercounting the numbers of deaths and COVID cases or not. What is your sense of that? And if there's undercounting, how much of it is there? Do you have any sense of that?
I mean, let's go by the data. If you look at the positivity rate, if in any state or in any country the positivity rate is more than 10%, then that is an indicator that we are missing out on the cases. We are under tested. Now, if you look at India's data, there are at least 7 or 8 union territories or states which have more than 10% positivity rate. In fact, in Maharashtra, I'm just saying, it is close to 20% at the moment. And in Puducherry, it's more than 30%. Now, places like Puducherry and Goa do not hit headlines, at least in terms of COVID. So, if we have more than 10% positivity rate, it is for sure that we are missing out on cases. If we do not conduct tests properly, we will keep doing so. Now, missing out on cases is one part of the story. They would not themselves be just ill, but they will also be spreading the infection. So that is something that we really need to be worried about. The other thing is about Delhi, as you were talking about, I think Abhinandan was talking about a few minutes ago. The positivity rate is going up despite the fact that we are having more antigen tests in Delhi than RT-PCR. In fact, if you look at yesterday's Daily Bulletin, the proportion of antigen tests as compared to all other tests, including RT-PCR, the antigen tests were about 70%. And the problem with the antigen test is their sensitivity is much lower than RT-PCR and other standard tests. So it is a given that we are missing out on cases. Now, so far as deaths are concerned, there is quite a possibility that we are doing so. A couple of pieces written for Wire by Priyanka Pulla, if you read those two very detailed pieces, it gives a clear sort of indication that we are doing so because of the criteria that we have fixed for saying that this is a COVID death and this is not a COVID. So we are missing out on cases and we are missing out on deaths also.
So, just a couple of questions before we move on. One is this, I mean, should we be prepared for a permanency of a life change of how we conduct ourselves, the way we, the crowded areas, going to restaurants, touching each other in the long term? Because my understanding was that once we have a vaccine or we have some sort of a, not just a vaccine. In fact, I saw the interview on the BBC of one of the scientists of the Oxford lab. He says we may not have a vaccine for sure, but I can tell you for sure that we will have a treatment that is specific for COVID. And that will take the mortality down to below 1%, well below 1%. So we may not be able to prevent it, but we'll be able to, cure it like we can cure many other viruses and illnesses. So will there be a back to normal world? Or are you saying with what I understand of your view on the vaccine, there is an element that this may be the way things are permanently in life?
I will bet, as you spoke about the scientist, I will really bet more on therapeutics or the treatment part rather than the vaccine part. That is one. Because, no vaccine guarantees you 100% efficacy. No vaccine so far has done in this world. So there will always be an element of skepticism. Now, you ask me, is it going to be 100% back to normal world? Absolutely not. At least for a couple of years. We will have to, wear masks. We will have to keep washing hands. We will have to ensure physical distance. Now, in a country like India, where, at the moment, for example, in DTC buses, you cannot have more than 20 people. But for how long are you going to sustain it? That is one. So to do these things, we are going to be, doing some huge changes in our daily lifestyles. Governments will have to do it. We will have to do it. But we are definitely not looking at back to normal world in a couple of years for sure.
I see. Anyone has any counter view? Because I'm getting back to normal. I've started playing football.
I
I'm
think
going
that-
out. I'm done with this shit, man. I can't handle it.
See, Abhinandan, I certainly do not mean to say that you don't go back or we don't go back to our lives. We will have to. But we will have to do it in a different manner. Probably that's the better way of putting it.
Yeah, a bit of precautions and do not go to the crowded places.
Yeah, masks, sanitize.
Masks,
No, I think
That's
about what you were saying, that there might not be a vaccine, but there's a treatment. I think that's a worse outcome for India, because in this country, the bulk of the healthcare is privatized. Even now, people don't go to hospitals because they can't afford it. And if it's going to be a treatment for people to go to hospitals and take that treatment, it's a very difficult thing.
Right.
But it's something that could happen sooner
Right.
than a vaccine.
Anand, you have during this time traveled by train a couple of times. What was the experience like? I mean, personally for you, did you feel any more paranoid or scared, or were you like just battling in your berth with not moving anywhere? And otherwise, at the railway stations, inside the railways, did you see any difference? And did you feel any more concern than you would normally feel?
I was not concerned about a lot of things, but probably I am not the right person to answer that, because even in normal times, I see myself and others see me as very careless. So I traveled by train to Mumbai, came back, then again traveled and came back. So I think the trains are a bit less crowded, and that's a respite. I liked that. And I think it made things more comfortable. Ironically, it made things more comfortable that there was less crowd, and other people's reaction was also more restrained. They didn't interfere with what you were doing and there was less talk. And I would see it differently. My personal experience was very good.
I see. But
The pandemic is a boon for
Anand, actually,
it's
sorry.
actually the same
for
I mean,
introverts.
for
at
even
least.
air travel. Like I went home and came back.
Right.
So the airport is like barely, there's hardly, especially in Delhi airport, which is huge. Like you barely see any people. They give you those face shields, those plastic face
Right.
shields. They give you masks. They give you sanitizers. And people who are sitting in the middle seats, they get those PPE kits, like those
Sure.
regular ones. But yeah. And because airplanes aren't that full, so when I was coming back, I think in the 2 rows, there were 2 of us in 2 rows, like
Right.
at
So you could
12
have
seats.
तुम
Yeah.
लेट सकते थे.
Yeah, easily.
Uh,
So that way.
So now this gets me to COVID related issue, which is the whole this examination, the NEET.
Yeah.
Now, Banjot, from you've been covering health. I mean, just to give a perspective to our listeners, the whole toss-up is that the students are saying, and there are various reasons, from some students saying we are high risk, we can't travel at a
Yeah.
time like this and take an exam. Some saying that we are not high risk, but we live with our parents who are high risk.
Some are in quarantine centers.
Exactly. Some students are in quarantine centers. They said, how can you take the exam? And this this exam, if I understand correctly, Anand would know. Anand, how many students take this exam for how many seats?
According to reports, 25 million have enrolled, but not all of them take. Some skip also, but even by conservative estimate, around 18 to 19 million people would students will take that exam.
For NEET, the number of applicants is 15 lakh, and for JEE, it's about 9 lakh.
Yes, sorry, I got it wrong. Not million, I meant 25 lakhs. What?
So that's 2.5 million. Yeah, we'll just clarify this. Yeah,
Yes,
go ahead.
yes.
Yeah. And for how many seats is this? And this includes seats in what all disciplines?
Means in all there is, I think NEET is now a common entrance for all medical colleges.
Okay.
AIMS perhaps it still has a different entrance exam, but all other medical colleges are with NEET. The score counts for entrance to all medical colleges. And JEE is for IITs, but other engineering colleges can also consider that a score for entrance. That is what I think. That it just like CAT scores can be considered by other management institutes for admission. JEE scores can be considered by other engineering colleges for admission.
Right. So before I come to Banjot about what health professionals' concerns would be because you teach a lot of young kids who either are taking their civil services and stuff like that, Anand. What is this? The concern of the government is that if they don't take the exam, this year will be a 0 year. That means from next year, the amount of numbers, everything becomes too big. I mean, they cannot cancel 1 year. And that to me seems like a reasonably rational concern. But is there any other concern, or will this concern mean that there'll be too many students for one?
Want postponement.
But what the government is saying, that postponement will mean this year has gone.
No, but if they postpone all exams, like even like class 12 exams and others, that means those students still have, I don't know.
No, but there will be this 1 year that will do nothing this 1 year. Maybe the guys who are going
It'll
from
be like
school.
a gap year for all students.
So that means next year it'll be double. So Anand, what is the concern from that angle? And then maybe Banjot can come from the public health angle. What is the contradiction, the conflict in the two concerns?
My sense is that the most important stakeholder in this would be students, and the silent majority of students want to take the test, at least the more serious ones, because once you prepare for something, you have a momentum going on. And if there is a delay, you lose that momentum. You may be distracted in doing other things, and once you lose momentum. So the silent majority, which may not be very vocal on social media, is for going for the exam. Also, the concern is because next year people are saying that postpone, but not have an idea postpone to what date. So because postponement to us is to an uncertainty, an uncertain time period, and that could be 1 year, 2 year, because there is no guarantee of things being the ideal condition for conducting an exam. Also, the concern that you voiced, that if it is conducted, say, next year, for same number of seats, how to different batches would compete for same number of seats.
तो मतलब 25 लाख से
So-
50 लाख हो जाएगा मतलब.
Now, the most prestigious exam in the country, say civil services exam, would be conducted. The preliminary examination of civil services and the premier exam conducting agency in the country, UPSC, is conducting exam in October. Even in that, about 7 to 8 lakh students appear. So it's not that other exams are not being conducted. Even in the interviews for civil services, which were very less number of students, only select few who get through the mains, but it was conducted 2 months back, the results were out. So I think things are going on.
Okay, two questions, Anand. One of the suggestions that I saw, I think there was a debate on this on NDTV. So they had some students. So some students said a solution is we conduct it phase-wise, the
yeah,
exam.
that's exactly what I was
It's not, it doesn't happen in one shot. It happens
Yeah.
in phases like elections happen. Can that be done? What is the practicability of that? And second, that have more centers. You know, right now, instead of having the limited, I don't know how many centers they have, but convert many of the other colleges, schools, just prepare them and have centers so that we are really spread out when we do this. So we don't have to travel long distances. How practical are these two suggestions? Is this a good middle path?
Number of centers have been they have already been increased. The number of students in each room, means number of students allotted to each room, has been reduced for social distancing norms. Also, the main problem that could be addressed is about transportation, because say that not be a good example, but let us say in Delhi, since metro is not operating now, and the mass transport, say public transport, is still restricted in some cities, or the village to city connectivity is not back to absolute normalcy. That could be one of the concerns, but authorities can address that, because still 2.25 lakh people are not a very huge number for a state to press into service its transport services.
Right.
Because the transport thing is a very, I mean, if that is not done and exams still go ahead, that disadvantages like the poor and the rural people like really badly.
Right.
Also, is the center making enough? I mean, is it going to be the state's burden to carry out these facilities, or is the center going to help out with it?
State burden, I think.
So then, I mean, that's what the Jharkhand chief minister was warning against, saying that we may
All
not
the
be able to take
opposition
the-
CMs are warning against
Yeah.
that. I think they are going to move Supreme Court against this.
आज तो वैसे GST पर भी sitting हो रही है वो GST में कभी there's just not enough funds with the state governments to pay
governments.
salaries. So I think Nirmala Sitharaman is chairing that meet even as we are recording this. But Banjot, from a public health standpoint, where would you weigh in on the safety of the students and the people at home vis-a-vis the administrative nightmare that is of postponing this exam?
We are debating here about the exams and how students are going to take it. In US, we are, or in fact across the globe, we are having a debate about reopening of schools. Although these are two different things, but to an extent comparable, right?
Yes.
So we have had more than 95 or 97,000 children in US infected due to reopening of schools.
Oh,
so
okay.
it is a possibility that infection may spread. But since this is going to be a one event kind of thing and not a recurring event as one has to go to schools, so you may say that it is not a very valid comparison. But the fear is of say a super spreading event, right? Children collecting at a place, or they are coming in. I mean, transportation issue was discussed. How would you ensure that when scores of children come to a center, especially the ones living in far off areas, those who will be coming to cities, because we do not still have full scale of transportation in our cities right? So how will they come to those centers? And while coming to those centers, how will they ensure that distance? While being in centers, Anand said that the number of students that will be in one room has been reduced. But is that enough to prevent spread is something we really do not know. So this is a very, very tricky situation. And to be, because this was asked to Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan in the last presser also, He said that since Supreme Court has given a decision on this, they are not going to comment on that, but they will share a standard operating procedures with the agencies which conduct NEET and the JEE examination. So the burden is going to be again on those states to implement that SOP. That SOP is, I think, yet not out, or at least it's not shared with the press or with the public. So that SOP is something which the central government is looking at, to find a way out. As you were discussing about CMs, I think as a panel said, they are also moving Supreme Court to file the review. So from public health point of view, it's really a very tricky situation. But those students who want to take examination, they may also say that if event like some big religious events which we have had in the country so far, if they were allowed, then why couldn't one day examination be? So they're still, the jury is still out, but as a health journalist, I would say we have really a lot at stake from the health perspective. Yes, 1 year is something, the loss of 1 year is something which we have to be concerned about. But what are we going to risk is also something which we really can't ignore. So until and unless central government comes out with a very clear SOP and we have, state governments really geared up to implement that SOP, we should be very, very cautious about it. Now, if these 7 CMs move Supreme Court and file a review petition, that is something we should look forward to. But in the given situation, if we do not have enough precautionary measures at place, I really do not think that we should go ahead with exams.
So, couple of things. One is that we have a term for the event you're talking about. It's called doing a tablighi. Thanks to JEE and all. So if you ever if you're wondering what we should call.
No, it's just not about tablighi. I'm saying
or now you can also say, or you can say doing a dharti tod. What did Modi do?
Dharti pakad.
Bhumi Pujan.
Nahin.
What the fuck?
Earth breaking. Bhumi Pujan. Now you break the
Bhumi
ground.
Pujan.
It's called ground
breaking.
breaking.
Ground breaking. Yeah, ground breaking.
Yeah. So or you can call it a
What are you?
Bhumi Pujan event. But
by the way, when it comes to tablighis, the courts have said that this was a vicious media trial and there's no proof.
In fact, I was coming to that. So if the tablighi was super spreaders, then clearly the Muslim gene carries it, because the whole Ram Janmabhoomi thing was with riding each other's shoulders and jumping. I haven't seen any such data telling us whether
Corona rave parties or
rave parties at Ram Janmabhoomi have. What's the data on that? I mean, you saw the videos, right? Banjot, I mean,
should have done that.
How is that? I mean, is anyone tracking the data? Because the whole thing of the central government, and I mean, I know for a fact several chief ministers, no one wanted to come on record, or many administrators. In fact, I've spoken to some IAS officers around the country who said that this whole thing of contact tracing, we are wasting so much of resources on it, from SDM levels to our level, ki kisko kahan hua hai. It doesn't matter now because it's bloody everywhere. So if we would just use this administrative bandwidth for something else, we may be more productive. Now, if we are doing it, has there been any tracing of, just like there was tracing of the people who attended the Tablighi event, has there been any tracing of the people who attended the Ram Janmabhoomi event, especially since the head priest was found to be positive? Banjot, is there any data on that how super spreaders have these events been?
So there are two things. One, first I'll talk about these data and these events. There has really not been any tracking. We do not even know that all those who attended these events, whether this was Ayodhya or whether that was that puja in Odisha, whether all of them were even tested, right? So if all of them were not even tested, so we really do not know who got infected and who did not. We have the head priest of Ayodhya being infected because he was tested. So that is one. And contact tracing, as you were talking about, it's almost an exercise, I won't say in complete futility, but it's not useful also at this moment. The reason being, of course, Indian government doesn't accept it, but we are in community transmission. We have been in community transmission for so very long now that people even don't discuss this term now. It's a given that we are in community transmission. So when you have reached that stage, when you are having more than 70,000 cases a day, contact tracing really does not help you, because it's a tedious exercise, right? If I am infected, then you may have to trace back, say, 70 or 100 people. And if 70,000 people are coming, if 70,000 people are positive every day, how on earth will you do contact tracing?
Yeah.
And our contract tracing exercise, which is being largely, decided by something called IDSP, Integrated Disease Surveillance Project, that has not been in very good shape for years. Contact tracing is something which we don't do just for COVID, we do it for many other infectious diseases. It's a very scientific and a very tedious exercise for which you have to constantly train your human resources.
I was talking to a bureaucrat in Delhi and he was saying ki, they should just make it community transmission. He says the amount of paperwork I deal with is, suppose, he says I'm not at work for 8 hours a day. I'm at work at 10, 12 hours a day. Out of which 6 to 7 hours, I am just doing this futile exercise of trying to figure out the logistics of contact tracing. कौन डेटा अपना कहाँ भेज रहा है, कौन टाइपलेट कर रहा है, एंड इस डेटा का हो क्या रहा है, कुछ नहीं.
So, what exactly is the problem in accepting that there's community transmission?
If you look at the countries around the world, and if you look at that WHO reports, which now come out on a weekly basis, and earlier they used to come out on a daily basis, India is the only country in the entire world which has so many cases. I mean, in millions now, and still does not report community transmission. We have a country like Bhutan, I think, where cases are less than 1,000 or maybe more than that, a bit more than that, but they say that they have community transmission. I'm talking about 1,000 cases, 1,000 cases, right? And they report community transmission. We are the only country on this entire planet which has so many cases, and yet we don't accept community transmission. So it's foolhardy. I mean, doctors accept it, everybody accepts it. Even the bureaucrats accept it, right? It's just that in the press conference, the moment you utter this word community transmission, they get so angry that to the point of closing the press conference. Right. So it's just in their head that they don't want to say it. I mean, AIMS director, Dr. Guleria, said it in an interview that, we are in community transmission in certain areas about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
We have associations of doctors, of epidemiologists saying we are in community transmission more than 2-3 months ago. So contact tracing is really not going to fetch us much at this point. The only thing which can fetch us anything is testing and screening people, right?
Maybe isolating.
Sorry, again, but why exactly? What is the problem in accepting it? Why are they being so foolhardy?
They're being
I mean, what is-
obtuse.
but
like
why?
I said.
But I mean, maybe just
why
ego.
is Sarkar being obtuse?
It's just say sorry.
I mean, does it have any political
No, say sorry.
motives?
No, say sorry.
political-
I'm Supreme, but there's no
It's just
sense to
about
it.
that.
अब sorry बोलो, फिर नहीं बोला, फिर से बोलो.
But that's really bizarre. I mean,
I just think because Modi ji must have said हम नहीं करेंगे, तब नहीं हो सकता. No, but I just
हम नहीं करेंगे तो नहीं करेंगे. It is that simple.
it is that
हम लोगों
simple.
ने पूछना भी छोड़ दिया है. कि अच्छा आप करोगे,
so
छोड़ दो.
Banjot, other than this, like what you are saying is pretty much a useless exercise. Now, what else are they doing to tackle this now? Because I mean, the sense one gets from reading all the reports and listening to all these people is that they're pretty much doing nothing. Because obviously the cases are going up every day and there's a record every day. So what exactly is being done to tackle this? Or have they just let it be?
See, the virus has a cycle, right? The curve will go up, it will reach a peak, and then, the cases will start receding. So at the moment, we are waiting for the curve to go down. That's it.
Okay.
We are doing nothing else. We are just waiting for the curve to go down. In the meanwhile, हम हाथ में हाथ रख के तो नहीं बैठेंगे.
हाँ.
So we are doing testing, and we are treating people in the hospitals. Doctors are doing their
And
trying to do their best.
COVID
I
के
mean, well,
It's
that is
not-
also
it's not
something
that bad.
most
It's not that
countries.
bad. I mean,
मतलब कई states
people-
आप अभी होके आए हैं.
no, people are working. I mean, the doctors are.
And obviously,
really
I mean, they don't have a choice.
So-
Somebody
so
goes to
doctors
That's what
are
I'm
working.
saying.
The
No.
tests are happening, and isolation is also happening. And states like, I mean, I can speak about Uttarakhand because I travel to Uttarakhand. They are extremely strict. I mean, once you hit the border, the first checking, okay, and then after that, okay, there is a multiple checkings. There's a tier of checking. I mean, you have police, you have the magistrate involved in it. So in case the police people, you can bribe the police people to enter that state.
There's another jurisdiction.
There's another.
Okay, got it.
So if you reach, so there are about 5 police posts. So after 3 police posts, you have to go to the magistrate. If you don't get magistrate thing done, you had it.
If I may come in here,
Sure.
people from here, from down to earth, we traveled to different states recently. Like I had gone to Mumbai to cover Dharavi. I was in Dharavi for 7 days. Few of my colleagues went to Uttarakhand, few went to Rajasthan. We traveled to different parts of country for our stories. Now in every state, and in few states, even in whichever district, these rules vary. So once you enter, you have to show, in Uttarakhand, for example, our colleagues had to show a COVID negative report. At Mumbai airport, I had to show a ticket that I would return within 7 days, and therefore they did not quarantine. So these measures, I'm certainly not saying that they are not in place. These measures are in place. That is one part.
Yes.
The second part is that authorities, if you're moving without a mask, you may be fined for that, right? So second part is authorities are still trying to impose these social distancing, what you call social distancing or physical distancing measures. The main part is testing and treating and tracking things. That is the main management part of it. Now, testing, if you see how good or how bad is your testing is reflected by the positivity. As I said earlier, in many states, we have a positivity rate more than 10%. So testing is still a gray area for us. For how long it is going to remain gray is something I really can't say. Treatment part, I mean, if you have Anand with you, I also, kept speaking to people when the virus or when the transmission was in really bad shape in Bihar, especially in Patna. I mean, I used to get phone calls when people would really, really scramble for beds. Doctors were scrambling for beds themselves, forget about the patients. So every state has, peak at different point in times. In Delhi, you may feel relieved at the moment. Or in Delhi, you were relieved when Bihar was having its worst.
Sure. And also nationally, I have a friend who's been wanting to come to India. She doesn't have an Indian passport or an OCI card. You can't come. I mean, you have to have a medical practitioner's license. I mean, there are 4 or 5 categories. You just can't come on a tourist visa or any other. Even the business visa is more difficult. Whereas getting into America is much easier right now. And also traveling within America, because I have friends there. They say like airports are not saying normal, like no one's wearing anything. We're just getting on flights and getting off flights, and maybe we wipe our hands and stuff. But there's no major, jaise India mein hai. So on that note, Banjot, we'll let you go, but first you have to give us some recommendation that you think would enrich the lives of our listeners.
You know what? It was a matter of, I think, perhaps luck that when we had the first case of COVID in the world, which was on December 31st, just a couple of weeks before that, Netflix, released a documentary called Pandemic. So it was an eerie coincidence, you could say, just a couple of weeks before that. So if you watch that documentary, you will understand to begin with what is a pandemic all about. We talk so much about pandemic. I would really say one could watch that movie, that documentary.
Right. Thank you so much. And thank you for your reporting. Good luck. And we look forward to more of your work.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you for having me. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye. All right, we shall move on to the Bihar floods that we've been promising our listeners for a long time, which is not getting much press actually. In fact, in the last few years, it got more press than it's got this year. So maybe Anand can tell us a bit about that. But before that, I had a few announcements. One is that we have a new NL Sena project. It's called Disastrous Consequences. Not a year goes by where some part of India is hit by a natural disaster. The year 2020 has been no different. There have been floods, there have been cyclonic storms, there have been droughts, there have been wildfires. And lives are lost, homes are lost, lots of properties lost, forests and farmlands are lost. But how have these disasters affected our ecology and environment? And what is making them happen? We want to do a proper deep dive report on it. So that is our new NL Sena project. We just, I think, launched it yesterday or something. We've already got, I think, about 5,500-6,000 rupees on that. So do contribute to that project. We're going to be deploying 2 reporters to work, maybe 15-20 days just focused on this
report from the 2 states, Assam and West Bengal.
Assam and West Bengal will focus the ground reports there.
Yes.
And of course, we'll get data from other parts of the country as well. But the ground reporting is going to be predominantly from Assam and West Bengal because they have been ravaged by various natural disasters. So do contribute to NL Sena project. This is an important story to do. So before we go on to Anand with Bihar update, this is an email from Himanshu Nivasarkar, who's a subscriber. Thank you, Himanshu, for your subscription and support. Dear NL team, the caravan reporter story was one of the key discussion points during Hafta 289. While secular values were never the strength of BJP, Modi government 2.0 has taken off the fig leaf of balance that was attempted in the beginning by earlier BJP governments. The boundary of acceptable civil behavior has been pushed in the last 7 years so much that even a pandemic took an Islamic overtone. It is truly difficult time for the Muslim liberal that believes in secular principles of the Indian constitution. In Hafta 289, the discussion on caravan report was followed by a discussion on Bangalore riot incident, and that discussion lays bare the convenient positions that many liberals take which lead the right wing to accuse them of being biased. Note how the caste of the victim suddenly became irrelevant and was mentioned only once or twice during the entire discussion. Had this been a Hindu mob, the entire Hafta discussion would have centered around caste. There are times when caste is a relevant angle, and that's not always the case, like it wasn't relevant in the Bangalore case. And a truly unbiased analysis of past 1 year of Hafta discussions would also highlight multiple other times when caste and religion was emphasized but was not dismissed by other panelists as being irrelevant. That, in some sense, is the outcome of a Hafta panel which comprises largely of upper caste Hindus. One more reason why diversity is necessary. Hafta has had multiple discussions on Delhi riots. Not once do I recall any of the panelists feeling the need to emphasize on peaceful origins of Hindu religion or talk about how Bhagwan Ram was a symbol of peace. That, in my view, would be irrelevant and frankly dishonest. To claim that religion is peaceful and the violent acts of its followers are somehow an anomaly, not true to any religion, is frankly a convenient excuse. One that unfortunately Mehraj indulged in 289 Hafta, and I expected the other panelists to call out that it was a humbug. The argument conveniently glossed over the fact that Islamic countries have a high share of violence and the worst record on minority rights, whether religion, gender, or sexual orientation. To a society that is increasingly disturbed by Islamophobia, the prejudiced and often unjust behavior of large segments of its followers should be a matter of equal, if not bigger concern. That even the last secular Islamic majority countries are turning fundamentalist should be a focal point of the discussion of liberals among any community. Religion is what its followers observe. To claim that the original concept is of peace is frankly disingenuous and needs to be called out. All religions have had their fair share of monopoly over violence at different points of time, lest anyone claim otherwise. To that extent, Abhinandan was an exception, I might say, a true liberal. To the other Hafta panelists, my advice, please don't try to monkey balance, call a spade on gender, caste or religion. Himanshu. Mehraj, you want to react to that before we move on?
Yes, I would respectfully like to disagree because this idea that most of the violence in the world is motivated by religion comes from headlines, not from actual data or understanding of history. In the last 200, 300 years, the bulk of the violence in the world is rooted in nationalism. Both the world wars, and when he says that Muslim countries especially have had the most violent record of recent years.
He says
in terms of treating minority.
dismal record on human rights, whether it is homosexuals or basically
But in terms of treating their minorities, right?
Minority.
And if you see, these are the same countries that have been at war for most of since at least the last Great War. These are the countries that have faced colonialism. These are the countries that have been constantly at war. So these are war-ravaged countries. And that war is not religious. Those wars have been nationalistic. In this country...
Or economic.
Or economic, obviously, because they're tied together. So this idea that all this violence we see in the world is motivated by religion, I'm afraid to say is humbug. It is not. There is obviously, because we are complicated human beings, our societies are complicated. There's always a religious angle, economic angle, social angle. But the majority of the violence, the basic reason for it is nationalism.
No doubt. But what I do agree with the writer on is that which is the piece that I had written, the record of Islamic countries on sticking to the fundamentals, which is a bit like the fundamentals of, let's say, Christianity. Thou shalt not work on Sabbath, Sunday, jo bhi hota hai. Now, no one is going to, take out a morcha that if you start work on Sunday, most Christians, they work on Sunday, ki, bhai, why are you working? Bible says not to. But sticking to the fundamentals is unique to Islamic countries, which are predominantly Islamic in the sense of, if you even I had taken the case, I think it's Indonesia, there was one island that was insisting that the Sharia should take over and not the Indonesian constitution. And they gave in to that. While everybody is moving away from religion, this is one was moving towards. So while I agree with you that it's complicated and there are economic reasons and there are, several other reasons as well, but the tendency of the fundamentalists being able to dictate governance in Islamic countries is more powerful, at least so far. I don't know, let's see where India goes now, considering, Modi ji is usually with saffron clad people. But so far, the tendency of religious fundamentalists to be able to dictate governance in Islamic countries is more than any other country.
True. And that has been the case for the last 60, 70 years since the war, like I said. And that's because if you see all these countries, like you see Iran, you see Saudi Arabia, you see the Gulf countries, they're not democracies. None of them. That is the fundamental problem. And why are they not democracies? Because there have been wars. Iran was a democracy until 1953. until Mossadegh was thrown over. Iraq used to be a secular democracy until the Americans came. Lebanon, Jordan, all of those countries until the war started, until the
So what you're saying is there has
Israelis
been no-
set.
But
So there is a religious aspect, indeed, obviously, but there is this background also.
but I think this.
And in a democratic country, you have those avenues to reform.
What you're saying, the evolution happens organically as opposed to Shah of Iran becoming, or
Exactly.
a dictator being put for economic reasons, and then
In-
the backlash of that is an Ayatollah Khomeini.
In Saudi Arabia, for example, one of the world's richest countries, you have one person basically even killing his family members without any protest or anything. Why? That wouldn't happen even in a country which is like as doomed as India right now. You will
You
still
can't do that.
protest.
Sure.
You can do something because you have that avenue of democratic.
So you're
this
saying
thing.
that-
So to say that because this monarchy does this, it means that whole society is violent because of religion is like a really simplistic take.
So
No, what I'm trying to say, if we had discussed this in the background of Northeast, I mean, this background that you're discussing is not relevant to Northeast violence. Violence.
Achha, Delhi ke violence. Okay.
Delhi
No,
ka-
this was not. This was
is not.
this was not in context of. This was we were having. Anyway,
This
also,
was
it's
Bangalore
true that the
violence.
Bangalore riots, the caste angle is not relevant here
No, but
as
he's
much as
saying that.
fundamentalism.
But he's
is.
saying it's not relevant. He's saying, and it's not relevant, which is why we didn't discuss it. But in many other cases, when the caste angle isn't relevant, we still discuss it.
For example,
I don't know. He hasn't given an
I don't
example. But
think
yeah,
we've-
I don't believe that
I mean,
we have discussed anywhere where caste angle isn't relevant, because I have often said that context is everything. So I'd be surprised, Himanshu, if we have actually given the caste angle. But if you could give specific instances, we could talk about that.
I mean, in terms of crime, at least I think we would be careful to point out the reason or the motivations of a crime
Sure.
and not paint something as a caste crime when it isn't.
So, Anand, if you could come in now, just tell us how have you been and what is the situation of the flood? Because I remember last week we did see some discussion on it and it got some news space. But this week it has completely vanished. Is the situation not that bad, or is I mean, if you could just tell us about that, then we'll talk about the forthcoming election.
The situation is stagnant. It has not worsened, but it is stagnant. The positive development is that for last 3-4 days, new areas have not been inundated. So that is the only positive I see. But the interest, the sporadic interest that national media and some sections of even international media had shown this year is also surprising, because besides a few numbers here and there, every year the same situation is there. So I don't think it's something very different. Apart from that, the pandemic situation was there, and the polls are more likely scheduled in November as far as ISHI guidelines, and speculation around it is there. But if you just shuffle a bit of numbers here and there, I don't think that is very different from what has been happening in this part of the year for decades.
But the coverage on floods, at least in Assam, has improved over the last, I'd say, since Newslaundry started. From 2012, when there used to be hardly any coverage, now Assam and Bengal flooding does get some coverage. Again, it is often not as much as it should be, and others, not very relevant stories make headlines. But it has improved. I don't see that improvement in Bihar. Is it because Bihar is neither Northeast? Because, that whole thing, Northeast is ignored, so we must give Northeast attention. Now, Assam comes under Northeast, so it gets attention. Now, Bihar, bichara, na apna, na paraya, na saga, na wahan to, it's stuck in the middle.
Time magazine, I think, had a cover story on the IAS officer in Bihar who made maximum out of...
Yes.
Which is kind of weird
The
because
floods.
some of the most prominent journalists in this country come from that region.
Yeah, exactly. They come from Bihar.
Bihar and Malayali
And
lobby is
there's
quite
been
strong in
for
journalism.
the longest time, and there's some truth to it, Kerala and Bengal get disproportionate coverage, and that's because a lot of editors and everybody comes from
Bengali
there.
or Malayali. That's true. The Bengal. So why is that? And what would the numbers be of people affected, impacted? Anand, do you have some sort of a rough idea?
Just something to which Raman sir said, that cover story in Time was written by the then South Asia correspondent of Time, Arvind Adiga, who won a Booker for White Tiger. And that story, that glorification of the officer ultimately proved false because he was accused of the flood scam. So we can say Arvind did a very sorry story.
What was his story? If you could just tell us in 3 words for those of us who haven't read it. It was.
मतलब he was nominated as one of the Asian Time newsmakers of the year, and he did commendable work in flood relief. But later on, there was a huge flood scam of which that the
He was
same
the kingpin.
officer was accused of being the kingpin. He has passed away now. He was jailed and he died of pancreatic cancer.
I see.
Anyway, now moving to the national disaster management estimates say around 85 to 90 lakh people have been affected in 16 districts. And the number of casualties vary. They are varying from 27 to 40, means deaths. But that is also suspect. Some of the deaths which are not flood related are sometimes also tagged with that. It may be a bit higher or lower. That can anyway. What I am saying is that there have been attempt. One interesting thing I find in the light of the forthcoming polls is that the government's record, state government's record on flood relief or any for in response to any natural disaster is not a major factor in electoral performance of a particular party, apart from, say, to a degree, the tsunami relief by Odisha governments. If you scrutinize the correlation between the state government's response to natural disaster and its performance in an election the same year, if it is scheduled, that is not a very say very strong relation. People have developed this that if any other government would have been, what would it have done? So this is the kind of indifference that has come in 2008. In past 2-3 decades, the most ravaging floods were witnessed in Bihar. It was even by Bihar's standards, it was a very it wreaked havoc. I mean, the Nepal barrage was broken and a lot of water came and villages were swept away. But just 2 years later, in those areas, then NDA government swept to power with record margin.
So you're saying there's no real correlation between flood relief, flood impact,
Yes,
and now coming to elections, while the BJP has unequivocally said that we will contest the election under the leadership of Nitish Kumar and he's the chief minister's face, I saw an interview of Chirag Paswan who was saying that it's not a given that he will be the chief minister candidate. Is it just negotiations for number of seats by the Paswan camp? Or the party, what's it called, the Lok Janshakti Party, Lok Janshakti Party, or is there any serious contender from the Paswans or anybody else, or is this just posturing before the election?
Little irritants, and some ego battles, and of course the fight for more elbow room in negotiations. The immediate irritant is that Bihar is one of the few states that still has a legislative council. So I think 22 seats were vacant, and LJP wanted a few of them, but the JDU put its foot down and they didn't allow LJP members to be nominated. Even BJP was conceding one seat to LJP, but JDU didn't allow that. So that was the immediate irritant of which triggered this backlash from Chirag Paswan, and he has made it an ego battle. Also, there is a new scramble for Dalit vote because new leaders have emerged, like Chirag Paswan. There is every party, even the mainstream parties have a Dalit Morcha. Sanjay Paswan is in BJP, and to get its plan B ready, the NDA has made peace with the ex-chief minister Jitan Ram Manjhi, who was a JDU leader but had broken away and formed his own party, Hindutana Awami League. Now he's most likely back in the NDA camp. So they are keeping the plan B ready if Chirag Paswan ditches NDA. Then for Dalit votes, they would depend on HAM, plus BJP itself has hold on some section of Dalit vote. Now Dalit vote in Bihar is around 18% of the electorate, and it is fairly divided because there are many subcastes within these Dalit votes which have their own leaders. Now Ramvilas Paswan's LJP is equivalent to like Jatov leader Mayawati. She has hold over one section of Dalits, but not all. So similar is the position of Mr. Paswan in Bihar.
Right. So, anyone want to weigh in on Bihar before we move on to the next?
So Anand, the floods have been happening for like the longest time now. What exactly is being done to like prevent the damage from happening every year?
That's a good question. The Assam, the reason they said was that the topography of Assam is such you can't do anything. Like 50% of the
because
state is a floodplain.
Same is with Assam.
So
No, but that is the Assam. Bihar,
what is
I'm
being
sure it's
done
not
in
that.
Bihar? I mean, every year there are floods, people die, there's lost property to crops, everything. Has anything ever been done about it, or what?
And I'm sure Bihar has a lot more flat area for people to move, right? Assam, there is no option, right? It's the whole, a large chunk of the state is a floodplain. So you have to continue occupying that. Bihar, that's not the case, is it?
See, whole of Bihar is not affected by floods. I mean, some parts of them, of the state is like 16 districts. Most of these districts are in North Bihar, and like Budhi Gandak, Bagmati River, the districts around Ganga, like Magad region, like Patna, Gaya, these are rarely affected. So what has been done? Bihar has a lot of state funds for embankments. In fact, flood engineers, irrigation department engineers, flood control engineers are seen as very lucrative postings in Bihar because of the lot of funds being channeled to that. But Bihar's floods are also very much dependent on the amount of water that Nepal controls. Means if it is very manipulative with its barrages, the effect is more in Bihar. So you see, if the effect of flood is severe in any year, Bihar politicians ganging up all across party lines to blame Nepal, or even sometimes they say that adequate central government, they shift the blame to central government that proper communication with Nepal was not there. But Gandak River, Kosi is carries the sobriquet of the sorrow of Bihar, because it is flooded almost every year. And this year also the Bagmati Kosi blunt is more. So the blunt more. So the state response has been to make dams, has been to have treaties with Nepal, but they don't seem to have worked out well. Yes.
While I understand in certain parts of the country, there is no option, like Assam. Like if much of the state is a floodplain, there is no room to go anywhere else. But in places where if you live in an area which is struck by floods every year, why would you not move bag and baggage? So I think one element is the geographic and social mobility in India is so fucked because of lack of education, lack of opportunities, that people would rather stay somewhere where at least they have 8 months of a decent life, even if, for 3 or 4 months, their lives are devastated. I think it's a huge commentary on the lack of social and economic and geographical mobility, which to me is the most accurate metric of opportunity. If there is opportunity, people will move.
It's just selflessness. Even during the migrant crisis, people just wanted to go home. They said we'd rather die there.
Yeah.
Because there's somebody to look after us at least.
Which is a lack of opportunity. So anyways, so now we shall move into the one issue that has dominated headlines. We are not going to touch Sushant. Although we have seen some vile reporting this week. They've gone to it, but let's not discuss it. We shall discuss the Bloomsbury book. So Manisha, you can tell us the context.
Wow.
the context, which is now the Garuda book. What is the context? Because we have lots of mails regarding that, and then we can just discuss that a
The
little bit.
context is simply that Bloomsbury published a book on Delhi riots. They commissioned a book written by 3 authors.
They didn't publish it. They promised
Did they commission it?
I mean, the book was already
yes,
published, and
it
then
was
they kind
pulpit.
of withdrew it.
Mm.
And I mean, it would have been published, and nobody would have cared, except the authors decided to hold a book launch, and they decided to call Kapil Mishra for it. Kapil Mishra of the Goli Maro fame.
Playing the politics.
Also, you had luminaries like Vivek Agnihotri and Nupur invited for that launch. So that created a lot of public outrage and furor on social media. Bloomsbury was tagged, and there were questions asked as to why are they okay with their logo being used for such an event. And the culmination of that was Bloomsbury said, "Na hamara launch se kuch lena dena hai, na book se. We are withdrawing it. The authors did not tell us that they were holding this launch, and we decided this alleged book." The statement was quite weird because for a publication that's published the book, they said that this was supposedly based on facts. I mean, what do you mean supposedly? You were editing the book or not?
Right.
So anyway, that happened. And then, of course, there was a predictable left versus right. Ki
And
liberal
these-
mafia has won versus...
And
These
even,
writers have got a political background,
yeah,
and
they got a
had,
political background.
they had also written a report for the Home Ministry.
Yeah, of course.
And the book is based on that.
The book is based on that report.
And you can actually read a review of the book if you don't want to read it. I hope you don't want to read it. It's by Ayush. She will tell you the salient features of what the book is all about.
And finally, it was published by Garuda Prakashan,
Prakashan.
which is apparently started by Sankrant Sanu. And to know his wonderful views, you should look at his Twitter timeline. He's truly an intellectual of international repute, worthy of the commentary that you have to see his Twitter timeline to see Mr. Sankrant Sanu.
What is
And
he? Is he like
Garuda has
a-
also published books by G.D. Bakshi and Saraswati, I think.
I mean, which is
Book on the
fine, but
Garuda.
I'm just saying it's interesting to go over his. So this led to a lot of churning within what people describe themselves as liberals or progressives, or how vague definitions are these days. Of that, this is even Anurag Kashyap and Anubhav Sinha said that the answer to a book is a book. This is a wrong thing. We should not outrage about this. This should not have been cancelled.
People even compared it to Salman Rushdie's satanic verse. Poor guy. Poor Rushdie.
Well, one of the writers of the book compared this to Charlie Hebdo, where 12 people were shot
Yeah.
dead. But clearly, it's the same, obviously. So this is the context in which this entire debate broke out. So let me start. Raman sir, what is your view on it? What is your take on this whole thing? Any angle. It may not just be the liberal conservative, on the accuracy of the reportage, on the book, on the writers, on the event.
I have no problems when it comes to the publishing of a book, whether written by a rightist or a leftist or a liberal. It doesn't matter at all. What really matters to me is using it for political reasons. I mean, you are running a false campaign. I mean, here the role of the publisher is very important. So if the publisher wants to publish a book, he must check its facts. If the facts are wrong, if it is a propaganda and it is being used for to justify violence against one particular community, then it is wrong. That's my stand. So in this particular case, the book was a complete propaganda. It was not the untold truth. I mean, even the headline given to this, the untold truth. I mean, so you're legitimizing, and institutionalizing the violence against one particular community.
Right. Your take?
So about whether it was freedom of speech and whether it was not, I mean, you have written a long article explaining why it wasn't that. And as Raman sir also said, I mean, it has to be facts. So I won't go into that. What I'll say is this, what you pointed out about the churning within liberals. Why does it happen every time something like this happens? Because they have never bothered to define what free speech is in the first place. They have always defined it according to their convenience. It's always been a line in the sand. Whatever is convenient, they'll go with that. So that's the one problem. Because if you apply the same standards, for example, the book we are saying it shouldn't be published because it's not factual, right? Every single day, even the leading newspapers publish fake news. There was an article some time ago in Indian Express by a police officer who basically called for genocide in Kashmir. There was an article in print the other day which basically said whatever Muslims are suffering in India is because they are to blame for that. Should they be banned as well then? Should they not be allowed to be published? Because you haven't defined what it is, what hate speech is, what free speech is, what's allowed, what's not allowed. You have this confusion. And why is that the case? Why haven't you defined it? Because always, I mean, you have to understand that free speech is a function of power. Amit Shah saying Muslims are termites is not free speech. Somebody challenging him saying you are wrong, that is, because Amit Shah has power, he has the platform. He can't say that. That is often overlooked by the same category of people. Another problem with this thing is that these ideals, whether any kinds of freedom, whether it's freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to practice religion, increasingly in the last, like since the advent of what you would call neoliberalism, last 40-50 years, they haven't been tethered, they haven't been rooted in values. Unless that happens, and what is the value they should be tethered to? The fundamental value is justice. If that is not the case, then all these
And that brings
ideals mean absolutely
that
nothing.
brings us further back. What is justice? Because that I think needs to be redefined and re-examined. in
True,
India.
very true. But at least like in every civilization, in every culture, you have some understanding of that. What is equality? What is justice? If you tether these values to it, they'll always be that. If they're not tethered to that, they're tethered to your personal likes and dislikes, you'll always have that confusion. And again, the organizing principle of our society these days, everywhere in the world, pretty much everywhere in the world, is profit. It's the profit motive. And that's precisely why Bloomsbury was publishing that book. That's why Facebook, the whole controversy about Facebook was about. So because that is
All
the
about the money.
organizing principle, all these ideals, freedom of speech and everything,
They become
it will be
secondary.
subservient to that.
Right.
Unless your value, organizing principle is say justice and equality, then they become subservient to that. And this whole, another interesting point is that all these people you named, for example, Anurag Kashyap, Anubhav Sinha, the so-called liberals, all of these people, if you really look at them, they're the people who will suffer no consequences from such hate speech. So when they are giving these sermons, they know that it doesn't affect them. That you can be certain that the same book will be used. It's already been used, that fact-finding report. We have done reporting
We've
on
done
it.
reporting on
It's being used to
To
put
push-
Muslims in jail.
Right.
Like right now. And you can be sure that 2 years, 3 years down the line, the same big book will be used to persecute more Muslims. These people won't have to suffer any consequences for that. And this whole idea about market, like somebody said it was a marketplace of ideas. You said one book, another
I
book.
thought we gave up on that phrase like 3 years ago. Who says
that
like
is the most
marketplace of
idiotic
ideas? Let it
cliche
decide.
anywhere. It's a
Yeah, it's a
great
very
idea
idiotic
if
cliche.
it is a very sanitized, very neutral kind of a marketplace. But what does a marketplace mean if, for example, you own a mall in that market, I have a street cart, Raman sir is not even allowed in. And worse, you are the mall owner, you not only make the rules of the business, you also run the security for the marketplace. What kind of a
Also,
marketplace,
marketplace of ideas is like
that?
वो college debates में सुनते हैं लोगों को
No, I
बोलते
तो
That's the
see,
most tired cliche
I
ever.
met the police officials here, so I am able to see it very clearly. I'm not spelling it out right now, but I'm seeing that the police, the government is using this northeast violence to kill, to strike fear among those who were protesting against CAA. Okay, so they are making it as part of the conspiracy towards this violence.
So basically anything to do with CA becomes a part of this riot.
And also striking fear among the Muslims that if next, that you cannot hold such protests.
Just
and this is happening because you will see it, very soon when Delhi Police Special Cell, which is handling with just one FIR, which revolves around conspiracy. So whenever they come out, they will come out with a charge sheet, and you will see that this is the design extended. This book is very little in front of what is going to come out in future.
Just the other day, Sharjeel Imam, you remember that JNU
Yeah,
scholar?
he
was arrested
I
in
saw.
January, I think, for sedition because he made a speech at one of the protests. This week, he was again arrested under UAPA for his alleged role in Delhi riots.
Right, yeah.
And he is supposed to have incited Delhi riots while he was in police custody, in jail.
Yeah. No, the way this investigation, in fact, we're doing stories on it. Anand, you want to come in on this Bloomsbury book? Should they have gone ahead? Should they not have gone ahead? Is it an assault on freedom of speech? Where are you on this entire discussion?
No, there are 2-3 ways of looking at it. First is I would look at as a contract between a private publisher and authors. So if they approach the court, so who is right, means that would be settled legally, means whether there was a breach of contract or not. So that legal intricacies we don't know. So if the sanctity of contract is taken as the starting point, then it is as a contract between 2-3 individuals and a private publishing house. Then first thing to look at is the clauses, what were the provisions. So that only a court of law can settle, and I don't know whether they have approached court or not.
Well, the authors have.
So if it goes to the litigation process, that is the first thing to look at. So that I said in context of Mr. Guha saying that his column was censored. So that it is a matter, first of all, it is a matter of contract. A man contracted to write and what he was entitled to, what the newspaper was entitled to. So it is also a matter of contract. So first thing. Second is what the mileage he drew and what the mileage these authors drew are the same, and that is profitable victimhood. So they will now play victims of something being suppressed or something, or they being not given the opportunity to say something or do something. And I think in some corner of their heart, they would be very happy because it has given a publicity that they would not have got otherwise. So they are now flaunting that so many copies of the book has been ordered on Amazon or whoever is selling anyway. So they have got the due mileage. Third is that people have stopped looking at say events like riots or thing as a students. Means people have assumptions, people have conclusions, but understanding the phenomenon of communal riots has now been divorced from the perspective of a student understanding. That is a problem I had in the university. So people like professors recommend third-rate books, which are even most revered books on production of communal violence in India are very partial accounts. So they would always take a perspective of a particular set of victims or other set of victims. So it is not what we students were there for. And I had a bit of arguments with my teachers in Delhi University about it. And what they were recommending were partial accounts, because like on Bhagalpur riots, when I was a child and I witnessed it and I saw the accounts of my friends, they had a very different accounts, and what the books we read were very, very partial. So that is a problem with the narration of riots, because a riot is a complex event. It has many elements, and we need to have the curiosity of a student to understand it, and that it has to be rediscovered even in these times.
Manisha,
So, two things. One, I personally have no issues with the publication of a propaganda. I think, in fact, good propaganda can sometimes even be called high art and does achieve the status of high art. Great example is maybe Ayn Rand's propaganda that every college students get taken in by. So I think liberals dilute the discourse when they make this about how dare you publish propaganda. Propaganda has been published for a long time. I think the central problem here was that this was a non-fiction book, and every non-fiction book has to operate with a certain set of facts. You can be cherry picking those facts, you can be selective with those facts, sometimes you whitewash those facts, sometimes you're convenient with those facts, but you still have to operate with facts. This book is fact-free, and it claims to be non-fiction on an event that happened 6 months ago, where we lost more than 50 people. So to publish a book which is not based on facts, call it non-fiction, have it riddled with misinformation. You can read Ayush's review for the sort of, claims it makes. That is a central problem, and a publisher has to take responsibility for when they publish something like this. I think Bloomsbury has said that this is self-publishing. It's a new sort of a branding thing where basically anyone who has a book can publish. I don't know if there's money involved. I'd like to know if it's self-publishing. Have the authors paid Bloomsbury? Or, why is Bloomsbury doing this khairat for them? Ki chalo, hum tumhara self-publish kar lo hamare saath. So you cannot disassociate yourself with it in the way that Bloomsbury was trying to do. And I think this is very much... Bloomsbury UK, for example, would not publish a book by Katie Hopkins saying that,
Violence against the immigrants in Berlin is a good thing.
Or for example, in the US, they'll not publish something on the George Floyd protest that happened, painting it as, a conspiracy by Jews. This is not acceptable anywhere in any decent democracy. And you cannot have these guys come here and make concessions just because it's India. So I think the protests have to be restricted to the fact that this is low on facts. It does not behove a publication that claims to have editorial standards to, publish something like this, and stick to that. I don't have any problem with BJP leaders getting space, getting published. Swapan Das has gotten a lot of books published. Arun Shoury's got book published. Kanjan Gupta,
Vivek
whatever.
Agnihotri.
Yeah, Modi, anyone can publish a book, whatever. I mean, that's a different genre altogether. Neither do I have a problem with propaganda. The problem here is simply a problem of facts on a real event.
I have a problem with propaganda because propaganda is mostly fiction.
Right.
So that's my problem.
No, I mean, non-fiction can also sometimes, you can use certain set of facts to push propaganda.
Is mostly spreading falsehood. So,
it's a little more complicated than that,
Or
I'd
it
say.
can be spinning. So I have a few emails regarding this. We have lots of emails regarding this. Okay, guys, I just have one announcement.
You don't want to give your tip?
I'll give my
We'll
VT. Although I've
reserve
written
for
a
the
piece on it. All that I wanted to say is on my piece, I recommend you read that piece. What's it called? Bloomsbury Bends.
Bloomsbury Bends. Yes.
So it's on the Newslaundry website. You can check out my piece. I don't want to repeat that. We've got almost like 20 mails this time.
Wow.
So I'm going to make a very strict rule from here on. Your mail has to be less than 400 words for me to even read it out in any part of it. And while I've been a little lax on non-subscriber mails being read, while we love the non-subscribers as well, even though they pay absolutely nothing to keep us afloat, I will not read non-subscriber mails at all. I mean, not even like in parts. So from next week onwards, you can mail us at contact@Newslaundry, share your feedback, your critique, your criticism, your inputs. But if you're not a subscriber and if you don't show up in the subscriber list, that we tally the mails that come in with, I will not be able to read out email, and it has to be less than 400 words because since last night, getting almost 20 emails, some of which are 1200 words. You can imagine, right?
But
what I'm going
sometimes
through.
they're very well written, so send them anyway. But
so that's
we
what I'm
won't
saying.
be able to read them.
So send
and
them. Okay,
we can
then
read them and we can sometimes publish
them.
them.
Yeah, we can publish the ones that are very long.
Maybe you can warn us right at the beginning that this is for
So for now,
publishing. And...
I mean, I won't be able to read out all the mails, but I'll read out the
Or you can do a
nichod.
nut graph. That's very popular these days.
What's a nut graph?
It's basically संक्षिप्त में article के ऊपर अगर आपने नहीं पढ़ना है, TLDR basically. You don't want to read the whole thing. This is my...
Acha, I thought a nut graph is a bar diagram made by someone like you.
Nut graph is, in journalistic parlance, it's like the summary of the story.
Like that.
Second, third
TLDR
para
version
usually.
basically.
So Kinshuk says, hi, I've been gone almost a month, but now I'm so sorry. I was running a little low on cash. So he's back as a subscriber for a month. He says he cheated on us with Netflix. For that, I'm sorry, and I want you guys to know it's not you, it's me. Now that you have taken care of that, let me bring up the topic of the recent outrage surrounding Bloomsbury's publishing of the Delhi riot 2020. I was watching Sekhri Gupta's National Interest, Do Not Roll Your Eyes, Abhinandan, where he was basically giving out the history of ban cancel culture in our country and pointed out several books being the point of outrage of several communities, whether they were Muslim, Hindu, Christian, right-wing politicians or intellectuals, and even the left liberals. He went on to criticize the publishing industry in India and called it an incestuous bunch. And he called them wine and cheese parties. Yeah. And he says, and they indulge in a small cocoon of wine and cheese parties. Now, I completely couldn't brush off what he said in that episode about our ban culture and how it has been in existence since pre-independent society, whether left or right. My point of contention is, should a book which has not seen the light of day, has not been read by most people, in spite of the fact that it has been authored by BJP sympathizers and right-wing intellectuals, who have all the reason in the world to paint the events in Delhi riot in a completely different color as they already have in the past, be subjected to a ban? We have laws against hate speech. Well, actually, our laws against hate speech are very vague.
Yeah. Also,
Secondly,
it's not a ban. There's no ban.
It's not a
on
ban.
The book.
I will not lie. Even I was quite happy when I read about the news of Bloomsbury halting. But in retrospect, have we committed the mistake that liberals despise? Also, Mehraj mentioned one document where it was mentioned about RSS chief's involvement and his occasional and association with Nehru towards achieving the common goal of accession of Kashmir. Could he mention the name of the book or document that he had spoken about?
Yes, of course. So the reference has been made by a lot of people, but I think the original, let me just get the reference.
So I'll just pull out the reference, but on freedom of speech,
It's called, it's called Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh National Upsurge by M.G. Chitkara. That is the where the original appeared, and it has been referenced by a lot of people since then.
So right. So MG Chitkara, RSS what?
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, National Upsurge. That's the name of the book.
By Chitkara. So check that out. That's where the original text appears. But about it's not a ban, Kinshuk. So I have explained how it's not a ban. If you read my piece, you'll get your answer. Then this mail is from Arshad. He says, this mail is regarding a mail you received in the last hafta. I apologize. This is a long one. Arshad, okay, I won't read the whole thing. A fellow subscriber mentioned the word secularism was not included in the original constitution. However, if he digs deep into the Constituent Assembly debate, he will find the same panel had included Article 14 of the Constitution, which states equality of every person under Indian territory. Even an alien will get equal treatment against any law within the Indian territory. People forget the fact that the word secularism had a totally different meaning in the time it was taken from Europe, where the state will be totally cut off from any religion. However, the Indian constitution and context was different because it was based on Indian nationalism, where any Indian with all their culture and religion will have the same right. Almost all members of the assembly agreed on a secular state, but only didn't add the word. Actually, that's a very good point. Just how we define secular was very different. And then you go on to say that I beg to differ, that its majority community, which is the torchbearer of secularism, there is not a single Muslim leader whom Muslims of India have voted since independence. Muslims in India have always backed Hindu community leaders, whether it is Pandit Nehru, Mulayam Singh, Lalu, Sharad Pawar, where the majority community, which has time and again created leaders like Yogi Adityanath, etc. Okay, good point. Then Arshad goes on to say, RSS, BJP has created so much victimization under the majority community that they see everything with an appeasement lens. Even having a meal under Holi, Diwali, Iftar banner becomes an appeasement. They can't think how a Hindu or Muslim can have an interreligious meal together. Even Hajj houses are a necessity because each country has a fixed quota of pilgrims. Then he says, Kashmiri Pandits are probably the only Hindu community persecuted in India. Around 750 people were killed. But if even now people talk about their persecution, they have an ultra solid edge. They get reservations, academic jobs, etc. However, if you compare their case with similar cases of riot victims, whether it is Moradabad in 1980 where 400 were killed, Nelly massacre in 1983, 2000 were killed, Bhiwandi where 250 were killed, Bhagalpur where 1000 were killed, Babri where the Bombay many killed, and also the Delhi riot, that same narrative is not carried out and the benefits aren't given. So it's time majority community realize they can't live in a bubble that we are so persecuted in this country, whereas it is them who have suppressed every caste, creed, religion, linguistic, ethnicity that's different. Arshad. So Arshad, thank you for your mail. I agree with you on the paribhasha of secularism, but it was included in our constitution, some found the other. And this whole narrative of Kashmiri Pandit exodus, media did not cover it. A lot of people, and this is where, like Manisha was saying, this Sushant Singh Rajput case being a case in point where you repeat a falsehood and it becomes the truth. Who says it wasn't covered? I mean, half the people who are mouthing this were not even around when the Kashmir exodus happened. They've heard some, ignorant people, whether it is our leaders who are as ignorant as the Twitter folk. I have worked in Newstrack. The amount of coverage Newstrack did of the Kashmiri exodus.
Bandits.
It was, but there were no channels. It was Doordarshan, Sarkari channel. Today, tell me how much coverage of Muslim riots has Doordarshan done? अबे coverage हुई है यार, मैंने देखी है. तुम न्यूज़ट्रैक की टेप्स निकाल के देखो कितनी coverage हुई है. अखबारों में हुई है. लेकिन तुम्हें टीवी देखने की आदत है, इंटरनेट की आदत है. तब इंटरनेट नहीं था, टीवी नहीं था. मतलब टीवी था लेकिन चैनल्स नहीं थे. अब बताओ, अब कह सकते हो कि नहीं हुई coverage?
I remember 1998-2000 and the Kashmiri Pandit refugees were here in Delhi. So I got so many stories done on these refugees.
So many, have you ever heard till today, do you hear Sardar saying that हमारे coverage नहीं हुई नहीं हुई थी coverage. दूरदर्शन में क्या हुई थी coverage? किसी की हिम्मत नहीं थी coverage करने की. He won with a mammoth Rajiv Gandhi. Do you see, although the Sardars are a fraction of the total population, क्योंकि जितनी coverage हो सकती थी हुई थी, जितनी नहीं हो सकती नहीं हुई थी. See how much news coverage Doordarshan gives to anything, depending on the government power, and see private agencies that existed at the time, how much coverage was there of the Kashmiri exodus.
Just one point about this. I mean, I understand where he's coming from about like the number of people killed, but such events shouldn't, I mean, every death is a huge tragedy, but they shouldn't be only viewed through that prism. Like these many people were killed and so this one is bigger than this one. That entire community was uprooted from their homeland.
Right.
They had inhabited that place for centuries and overnight it was all gone. So, I mean, just saying that more people were killed somewhere else, that shouldn't be a metric of comparison.
That's true, yeah.
I have a subscriber, she doesn't want to be named. She's just written a long mail where she was aghast
By Abhinandan.
by Abhinandan. Okay, probably she hasn't mentioned me by
Obviously.
name, but by the panel. So no, she hasn't named me. On the discussion on period leave, she says that the main reason is that in Hafta 289, it is appalling views presented on the subject of period leave and also maternity leave. By the way, as a correction, in India, the maternity leave is 6 months and not 3 months. The law was amended sometime in 1718 to the extent from 3 months to 6. The argument against extending the leave was similar to the ones being proposed against period leave.
Yeah.
She says, I don't have a very strict view of the same, but as someone who has seen friends suffer from debilitating pain and nausea during their periods, I do believe that it is something which companies and employers should have a conversation on. I'm sorry, but this argument is specious that it will deter employers from hiring women. It is clearly established by maternity leave policies of several European countries where maternity leave extends up to 1 year. Employers in India are slowly beginning to realize the importance and need to provide women. So fair enough. In fact, if I'm not wrong, we have a piece coming up,
yes,
by a subscriber very much like you. I'll just PB are your initials. You don't want to be named. So ma'am, we have a piece coming up on this. Thank you for pointing it out. I am rethinking my utterances on this, and I shall do some Atma Chintan and come with a very clear view on this. It takes me a while to get clarity on views that I don't have first-hand experience on. So maybe I need to think this through a little bit. Then this feedback is from Ali, who's a recent subscriber. I'm not a holder of any big title or high degree as your usual subscribers. So I apologize. Dude, don't worry. At least I'm not either. And that doesn't keep me from pillowing my gyan. I really enjoy TV nuisance in order to see what a debacle our current news media's stature in the name of journalism. I love Manisha for her satirical, comical and witty way of reporting.
Woohoo.
I enjoy Abhinandan in regard to NL interview, which I haven't heard many give you much praise for.
Yeah, you can watch Barkha Dutt.
Though I'm sure there is a group of researchers who are responsible for you achieving it. Well, yes, I won't lie that I do have some research handed over to me when I go to interviews, but
A lot of it's just my talent,
a lot of the research I do myself. I'm just saying. Unlike Manisha, who
It's just
just
me.
lands up. In a broad...
Though I did think Barkha ko you could have grilled a little.
I could have grilled her a little more, sure. But I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is that when I'm at Quorum, my demeanor and manner
Yeah.
is different from when I'm in my studio. It is actually an event of someone else who I'm just happy.
Yeah.
No, but still,
it was
I
great
think you
fun.
asked all the
But it
relevant
was great
questions.
fun, and I think one thing
You asked
that
all the relevant questions, and it was very engaging.
one thing that struck me though, I mean, we've critiqued Barkha quite a bit on this show, and we have usually, but she's an immensely watchable person.
Yeah.
You know,
She gets TV.
while making sense. Like Arnab cannot be watchable when he makes sense. He's a bore. He's a giant bore if he ever chooses to make sense. She's one of the only few anchors who can hold your attention while talking
Yes.
sense. It's a big loss to TV.
So Ali goes on to say nice things about us. Thank you for all that. And he says, I would like to bring your attention to the issue of expat unemployment as well. We all know the current situation of unemployment within the country, but this is only the tip of the iceberg considering the fact that even in other countries, Indian citizens have faced layoffs or are being set back due to the pandemic. And then he's given 3 links. I would request you to look at this matter and tell us how it really impact this country. In any case, you guys are awesome. I hope you guys keep doing what you're doing. Remain a news platform. Well, thanks, Ali. You have said some nice things about having memorized our slogan that when the public pays, the public is served. Actually, Ali, I'll tell you, I was speaking to a friend of mine who's a banker in Singapore. Most of my friends from school are all in the financial industry. Some are on Wall Street and some are in banking in Singapore, which is one of the hubs of private banking, which is what is the thing when you use a polite word for something that you don't want to use a rude word for? Euphemism, yes.
Euphemism.
So private banking is euphemism for ill-gotten wealth being parked. So he was telling me that basically there's going to be a real, in January is where at least he and his analysts and his team are looking at the real bloodbath. Because in January, most of the Western countries, also Singapore, the governments are giving them money to make sure no one is fired. But that will probably come to an end in maybe November, December, Jan. He says then, he's going to get rid of a large chunk of his team. And all these people are very highly paid people. And he says, so the money we get, which is just government money actually, because we don't have that much business, is going to the stock market, which is why the world over, stock markets are zooming up while the economy is going down, which makes no sense. And the RBI governor said that there is a disconnect between the stock market and the economy.
Because though that stimulus package the US announced, one big reason is when they announced that, much of that money went to Wall Street.
Exactly. Now that will probably end in December. And he says that's when the, bloodbaths will begin. So we're going to wind up today. I have a lot of emails. Bhanu, your mail is there. Asif, your mail is there. And I'm going to read all these mails next time. Ifat, your mail is there. Dev, your mail is there. Prakash Iyer, your mail is there. But because of the amount of mails I've got, I'm going to have to figure out a more efficient way of reading these mails. So from next week, I'm again repeating, if your mail is over 400 words, we may publish it if it is, if it goes through our editorial filters. But otherwise, for me to read out bits of it, it has to be under 400 words. Like I said, we're getting almost 20, 25 mails a week. We will not read mails by non-subscribers. But yet, I do want to know what you guys think. I want you guys to take us off on or disagree with us or correct us on various issues. I find that hugely valuable. So please don't discontinue. The only reason I'm putting this in place is so that we can include more mails. When there were like 5, 7, 8 mails coming, I could, go read 600, 700 word mails. But now with 20 mails coming, I'd like to include as many as possible.
But we can be strict about not allowing non-subscriber
Yeah, that we
mails,
can be
because that
strict
I think, too bad.
Too bad.
You gotta pay if you want to be heard.
No, sorry. What kind of a slogan is that? Manisha is such a fake. After giving all this gyan about justice and all.
If you want to be paid,
The
you
mall
gotta
doesn't
pay.
have, this mall has you, this mall doesn't, this person
ये
has a
तो
radio.
मेहराज ने बोला, मैंने थोड़ा ना
So you
बोला.
were nodding your head in agreement.
I'm a free marketer.
तो
you,
ठीक
you
है.
know my.
But anyway, so contact@newslaundry.com. I repeat, contact@newslaundry. Share your emails, but please stick to the rules I said. And all the subscribers whose mails haven't got read this time, I'm going to mention them in the next time, and we will take out each of your criticism. And there have been several criticisms of Mehraj on his, at least the perceived kind of whitewashing the Muslim aggression while focusing on the Hindu aggression.
Wow.
There have been several pointing out my somewhat lax take on gender issues. So we shall.
Except
But this
I'm
is
the only perfect being on this show.
Okay,
No,
fine.
this is
Surrounded
going
by
to be-
imperfections.
this
Are all Pahadis like you and Kangana Ranaut, or you have other varieties also?
Yeah, Uttarakhandi Pahadis are very different from Himachali Pahadis. Please don't compare us.
You're exactly the same.
No,
In fact,
Uttarakhandi Pahadis we are higher.
I was reading Kangana Ranaut's Twitter
We're on
timeline. I
a
said, oh,
higher
Manisha's
plane.
changed her DP. I said, oh, it's Kangana Ranaut, it's not Manisha. So,
We're on taller mountains.
I also in
Greater Himalaya.
Greater Himalaya. Greater.
Also, this week, Delhi saw some amazing weather. We have had the most good air days since 2015. We've had 5 or 6 good air days, which meant that all the creatures, bright and small, young and beautiful and not so beautiful, were seen. In fact, a really beautiful creature was seen strutting its stuff at 7 Racecourse Road, and next to it there was a more dancing also, a peacock. The more beautiful creature was Modi. But we have a song dedication to that. I'm sure you guys have seen the video that he put out.
Beautiful.
It's extremely humid right now.
But अरे सर आज सुबह क्या वेदर था, हिल स्टेशन वाली फील हो गई थी. बट अभी recommendations दो, हम 2 घंटे से बात कर रहे हैं. बताओ, starting off with Raman sir. Recommendation sir?
I would recommend our NL Sena story about how people, did not get their houses after spending lakhs of rupees. Is really, a telling story, about a country where people can just these builders can just get away with, such impunity.
Yes,
so,
we have a new NL Sena project up. Do check it out.
So this is the story by Shweta Desai and Ritika Jain. So I'll recommend that.
Right.
I recently read Yogendra Yadav's new book, Making Sense of Indian Democracy. It is a collection of his essays written over last 2-3 decades, and the last one having been written in 2017. It's a broad sweep of topics, themes, but he has tried to classify among different themes. I think he has a theoretical perspective on different developments in Indian politics, democratic dynamics, the responses, the concerns, as well as the sheer rhythm of it. And of course, he comes with his own biases, but for its sheer scholarship and the data and the insights that he has, it is a good and enriching read. So it's published by Permanent Black, which is an imprint of Orient Black Swan. So the book is Making Sense of Indian Democracy, Yogendra Yadav. Second is Pawan K. Verma's translation of selected parts of Ramcharitmanas. He has written an ode to Lord Ram. So he has. I was keen to see how the beautiful poetics of Ramcharitmanas comes to English, and he has done a good job of translating because I had read it in original, and the English translation has gone well. And by the way, I also learned that the great novelist Vikram Seth is also working on a project of translating Ramcharitmanas. He's a very good translator also because he has done brilliant translations of Chinese literature. So
That'll be
I would
something to
look
wait
forward
for.
to that also. Third is my last recommendation is a piece and that appeared 2-3 weeks ago in the Hindu. It was written by a sociologist Dipankar Gupta, and he has focused on the non-economic factors of migration, the sentimental pullback, and the anxieties that a family or a rural household or the home pulls back migrants, and that may not be always explained by economic factors. And he has said that there is not a laboratory, and with time, data would emerge. And he has cited previous studies and even the. I was keen that it came in distress journalism that we saw in wake of pandemic, but it didn't because it's an abstract idea, but a very real one at the same time, because that is what I gathered in my limited interactions with people who returned back, that economic factors were only partly responsible. There were other factors also. So I think it's a very good piece and very valid observations. I wish somebody else made it when the migration was in full swing. These are the three recommendations. Yes.
Thank you, Mehraj.
I'll recommend 3 pieces which I think should be read together. All 3 of them in different contexts with different analytical angles basically try to explain why Hindutva has taken over the Indian polity and society. 2 of the pieces are pretty recent, were written like last week or the week before, and one is a little older. So one piece is by Ijaz Ashraf in NewsClick. It's called What Yogendra Yadav and Pratap Banu Mehta Don't Get About Secularism. The second one is by Christophe Jaffrelot in Indian Express called Mandal Moment 30 Years On. And the third one, which is a bit older, it was published in February on the India Forum by John Dries. It's called The Revolt of the Upper Caste.
I will suggest your interview with Barkhadat
Okay, clearly you
as a
read nothing.
weekend watch.
Clearly she has not read. She has spent her whole week watching Arnab, Rahul Shiv Shankar.
I'm going to become super dumb, yeah. I need this. I need to get off nuisance. Otherwise, I'm going to have nothing to say. But even like in social conversations, I have nothing to say anymore, yeah. I'm just constantly outraging.
And she's very sharp.
Otherwise, catch her recommending anything done by me.
I'm being dulled down by Newslaundry's
Dumb
job.
down.
So you should recommend that, no? Watch.
Yeah, watch
Why?
this.
Why will I ever do that?
So I have 2 recommendations. I guess one is I would highly recommend my own piece, because this whole Bloomsbury, it's just become such a confusing this thing. I've urged people to read it. The other piece I highly recommend is in The Conversation. It's NBA teams boycott playoff games in response to Jacob Blake police shooting. It's a piece, I think he's the editor who's written it, on those of you who've been following the violence in the US, because this man was shot 7 times in the back with 3 of his children in the SUV by cops, and they've had to postpone the NBA playoffs because I think right now Orlando Magic refused to play 1 game and there are others. And this piece talks about how the NBA and the basketball teams have been at the forefront of actually taking on social issues. And I think it's phenomenal that they can do this, and it is so far from anything any Indian team could ever do for social justice. I think it's an important read. It gives you some facts. It also gives some perspective. And the third thing I'd like to recommend is do watch all the speeches from this one son, poor chap, he's completely off. Trump's son's speech, to Melania's speech, to Mike Pence's speech. Subha sir aate rehte hain wo CNN pe.
Nikki Haley also.
Nikki Haley's speech is okay, but some of the speeches, basically they're saying anything. They are just, I think, 1 or 2 speeches away from saying that if you don't vote for us, zombies will rise out of the earth and you will not be allowed to go to church, you will not be allowed to breathe, you will not be... I mean, how can responsible leaders paint such a picture? I mean, I don't have a dog in the fight in America. I mean, I don't care. But, I mean, I'm shocked at the level of discourse. And this is, I mean, similar to what I think we will be seeing here. We saw some hints of it. कि अगर तुम हमें वोट नहीं दोगे, तुम्हारी बेटियों को लव जिहाद से उठा के ले जाएंगे. some said na, that
Pakistan mein patake photenge.
they will not, and they will not, your wives and daughters will not be safe. So I think, just as a sociological exercise, watch the speeches and read these two pieces.
But on the other side, there's also, I mean, in the same society, like you were saying, these players boycotting matches and stuff. In India, that's not, like you said, not going to happen. Just like for several weeks, there was a huge outrage about George Floyd case. Not
Right.
there, in India I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Couple of weeks ago, in West Bengal, Kuch Bihar district, a young Muslim guy who was, after dinner, was sitting outside somewhere near a pond fishing. BSF came. His name was Shaniur Rahman. They chased him away, caught hold of him. One BSF person allegedly put his knee on his neck, exactly like happened in George Floyd case. And then the officer came and shot him from point blank range twice. And you haven't, like, there have been a couple of reports that's about it.
Just reports, but no outrage. Right.
Nothing.
So yeah, so it's an interesting sociological study, and I will leave you with this song. It is dedicated to the Prime Minister. I hope he's listening. Modi ji, अगर आप सुन रहे हैं, ये गाना आपके लिए है. But पता नहीं आप सुन रहे हैं कि नहीं, क्योंकि आजकल free है, तो you can make the most of Hafta. We hope you will join us next Hafta again, and do recommend Hafta while you can, while it's free, and enjoy this song.
नाचा किसी ने ना देखा है, हम जो थोड़ी सी भी के जरा झूमे, हाय जैसे हमने देखा जंगल में मोर नाचा किसी ने ना देखा है.
All the Newslaundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to Newslaundry. Help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs, and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.